The first thing I noticed was the clatter dying in the room as my sister hooked her arm through her boyfriend's and aimed him at me. Her grin sharpened before the sentence landed. Colored lights shimmered on her cheekbones when she said it. The disappointment of our family. Laughter rippled from my parents, practiced, seasonal, as if my shame belonged with dessert. I stayed still. I stayed silent. He didn't. He studied them, then me, and spoke evenly, slicing the noise. Fascinating, because she's not the one finishing tonight. That was when the balance tipped. In that breath, everything changed forever. My name is Mara Quinn. For as long as memory reaches back, I existed along the margins of my own household, never centered, never chosen. As a child, I learned early how to soften my footsteps, how to set dishes down without noise, how to stand just beyond the glow of conversation, leaving room for the people my family truly saw. Dinner rarely felt like a meal, it felt like a performance, and everyone else had rehearsed lines. My sister, Eliza, occupied the center seat beneath the chandelier, her plate filled before anyone asked. Mine arrived last, whatever remained after the bowls circled back. Lukewarm vegetables, torn bread, the smallest cut of meat. I never objected. Objections summoned my mother's voice, gentle in tone, edged with warning. "Don't be difficult, Mara." She repeated it so often it settled into the walls like a metronome. My father hardly noticed me unless something required attention, a leaky pipe, a misplaced receipt, an errand Eliza preferred to ignore. I was useful, not visible. He called it responsibility. Somehow, my sister was never assigned the same lessons. She received new clothes, extracurriculars, opportunities wrapped as encouragement. I received speeches about gratitude and realism. One winter afternoon, Eliza forgot a school project, a detailed presentation my mother had helped assemble. When the school called, my father didn't question her. He turned to me instead, irritation already sharpened. "Why didn't you remind your sister?" As though my purpose was not my own growth, but preventing hers from faltering. Eliza showed no embarrassment. She rarely did. In our home, blame wasn't earned, it was designated. As we grew older, my presence thinned. My accomplishments, modest and hard-won, dissolved beside her displays. I once earned acceptance into a local design program. I brought the letter home, pulse racing, hopeful that recognition might finally reach me. My mother read it quietly and set it aside. "Eliza has practice tonight," she said. "We can't be running everywhere." When I stayed silent, she added that practicality mattered more. The letter vanished into the trash that evening. 2 days later, new costumes arrived for Eliza. Funds vanished the same way my possibilities did, quietly. Money intended for my lessons, my savings, my future, was rerouted into her expenses. Shoes, fees, trips. I stopped asking. Questions only earned weary sighs and explanations about priorities. "We support what matters most," my father would say. I understood perfectly. No one ever labeled it favoritism. They called it care. They called it necessary. They called it family. And I accepted it because acceptance made the house bearable. Still, I wasn't blind. I nurtured small defiance in private, late nights sketching beside humming machines, coins tucked into envelopes hidden behind cleaning supplies, building a private place where I didn't need permission to exist. Even then, a fragile hope lingered. I believed effort might earn warmth, that silence might someday be rewarded. It took years to learn that the warmth was never meant for me. That realization arrived softly, like an eraser clearing a name. A look withheld, a pause too long, a door closing without sound. That was when I understood belonging was conditional, and my condition was absence. I learned to read rooms by what they withheld, to measure love by allocation, to survive by shrinking. I became fluent in silence, skilled at endurance, patient with disappointment. While others celebrated milestones, I catalogued omissions. Birthdays passed with practical gifts, praise rationed carefully, affection offered indirectly. I smiled anyway. Smiling was easier than explaining the ache of being present yet unclaimed, loved in theory but overlooked in practice. A shadow.
I stayed late at the office, the kind of night where the city hum sinks into the walls and becomes background noise. From the kitchenette came my sister's voice, bright, effortless, practiced for an audience she assumed would agree. She laughed as she spoke, explaining how I never finished anything, how I drifted through roles people handed me out of charity. I paused near the glass conference door, hand wrapped around my bag strap, breathing slowly until the sting dulled. By the time I walked past, the laughter had moved on, my name already discarded. The next morning, my screen greeted me with absence. The campaign file I had shaped for weeks was gone, replaced by a refined version with a new title and someone else's initials resting confidently at the bottom. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me to accept the rewrite. I didn't. A timid knock followed. The intern slipped inside, eyes lowered, words barely louder than the air conditioner. He told me he watched her open my folder, copy it, delete the original, then upload the replacement. I thanked him with a nod meant for patterns, not people. I opened the system logs. There it was, her account. Timestamps precise enough to feel surgical. Download, delete, upload, each click deliberate. At the afternoon review, she narrated my history again, explaining how I used to quit, how pressure made me fragile. Polite smiles circled the table. I kept my hands flat, palms down, grounding myself in the chill of the wood. Silence settled on my shoulders, familiar and heavy. I let it stay. After the meeting, I didn't head home. I walked out into the cold, letting traffic and lights slide past without meaning. I kept moving until the ache sharpened my focus, until I reached a co-working space I knew would be empty. The door buzzed open. Inside, white light, long tables, the lonely murmur of a printer. I laid out my laptop and began reading the truth line by line. Logs never exaggerate. They simply show what was touched. I created a folder and named it plainly. Then I gathered everything else. Budget approvals she signed, emails framing me as unstable, messages redirecting credit toward her name. At midnight, my phone vibrated. A relative had found old documents, savings meant for me, quietly rerouted years ago. I added them without emotion. Around 1, snow started falling outside the tall windows, thin and steady. I watched until my breath slowed, then opened a spreadsheet and began listing everything I had built, line by line, without commentary. I understood then that what I was building wasn't revenge, but record, a clean accounting of effort, time, and ownership. Cold work, quiet work, the kind that survives scrutiny. I didn't feel angry, I felt precise, and precision, I was learning, had always frightened people who depended on my silence. It was the first tool I trusted enough to carry forward alone, without permission, apology, or fear anymore. I arrived before dawn, the building still half asleep, lights flickering on as if surprised to see me. I unlocked my workstation and began pulling threads, not to tangle them, but to see where they led. I traced client histories, proposals, revisions that bore my phrasing even when my name was absent. Each discovery felt less like a shock and more like confirmation. Patterns, once named, lose their power to confuse. I visited the old studio above the laundromat after sunrise, the place where I first learned how to make work without permission. The machines rattled below, detergent and steam thick in the air. In a drawer wrapped in an old scarf, my drives waited. I plugged them in, patient. Folders opened like memories with receipts. Early drafts, visual systems, tone guides that later became signatures others wore comfortably. I copied what belonged to me, not as theft, but as retrieval. Back at the office, the director sat alone, eyes tired, fingers hovering over his keyboard. He gestured for me to sit and turned the screen. The file she claimed still carried my metadata, hidden beneath a new title. He placed the access logs beside it, aligning timestamps like coordinates. He asked if I wanted him involved, if I was certain. I thought about years of being quiet, about how silence trains people to expect compliance. I said yes. We worked steadily. No speeches, no raised voices, just documents aligned, screenshots labeled, discrepancies marked. Every hour logged, every transfer flagged, every edit traced. The work was boring in the way truth often is. By noon, the packet was finished. He offered to handle delivery, to shield me from fallout. I held the stack and felt its weight settle my hands. I told him I would walk it through myself. I didn't rehearse anything. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke a language that didn't require emotion. I scheduled the meeting and returned to my desk, finishing routine tasks as if nothing had shifted. When people passed, they smiled, unaware. That anonymity felt earned. As the afternoon thinned, I reviewed my spreadsheet again, adding final notes. Clients I secured, strategies I authored, revenue attributed elsewhere. The list stretched, steady and undeniable. I saved it, backed it up twice, and closed my laptop. Whatever came next would arrive on paper, not whispers. That evening, I packed my bag and left at a normal hour. Outside, the sky was pale, undecided. I felt the calm that comes from alignment, from knowing where you stand without being placed there. For the first time, the story ahead felt authored, not assigned, and I walked into it without looking back. I carried no speeches with me, only clarity, and clarity travels lightly, asking nothing, explaining nothing, leaving space where noise once lived, and teaching patience the discipline of waiting while systems adjust, records circulate, decisions settle, and consequences arrive on their own time. Quietly, deliberately, without witnesses, without permission, without apology, without delay. I arrived late to the dinner on purpose. The house was already full of sound when I stepped inside, warmth spilling into the hallway, layered with spice and forced cheer. Coats were piled where they didn't belong. Laughter rose and fell on cue. I stood for a moment, letting the door close behind me, letting the room continue without adjusting itself for my presence. My sister occupied the center, as she always had, telling stories shaped for approval, leaning into familiar shoulders, her confidence rehearsed. When my father noticed me, he pointed to the chair farthest from the light. The seat waited like an afterthought. My mother's eyes skimmed me quickly, noting details, correcting them silently. I sat without comment. Plates moved, conversations resumed. Then she stood. She always did. With a glass raised slightly and a smile practiced thin, she introduced me the way she preferred others to see me, as the one who never quite measured up, as the burden everyone endured with patience. Laughter followed, uneven but loyal, the old sound, the one that once trained me to shrink. This time it didn't work. Her partner set his fork down gently. The sound was small, but it traveled. He didn't look angry. He looked resolved. He said her name once, then said they were finished. The words were clean, unemotional, final. Confusion crossed her face before fear found it. He stood, connected his tablet to the television, and let the room watch facts replace stories. Files appeared, originals, logs, timestamps, names. Each slide removed another layer of protection she had relied on. Her voice attempted denial, then explanation, then silence. My parents watched as if seeing a language they didn't speak. The room shifted, not dramatically, but definitively, like weight redistributing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He stated. Credits reassigned, roles clarified, partnerships corrected. My work presented without commentary, allowed to stand on its own. When he named my position, it landed without applause. It didn't need any. No one looked at me. Not really. The narrative they had rehearsed for years had collapsed, and there was no space left for eye contact. I remained still, hands folded, heart calm. Silence returned.
But it wasn't the old kind. It didn't ask me to disappear. It acknowledged my presence without demanding performance. I left before dessert. Outside, the air was sharp and honest. I breathed deeply, not in relief, but in recognition. Something had ended, yes, but something else had finally been allowed to begin. I walked away without waiting for anyone to call after me. The house stayed lit behind me, unchanged, rehearsing its version of events. I didn't correct it. I didn't need to. The record existed elsewhere now, precise and complete, and for the first time, I trusted it to speak long after the noise faded.
Seattle did not feel like freedom at first. It felt gray, unfinished, undecided. Rain traced the windows of my small apartment as if checking whether I planned to stay. The rooms were quiet without tension, empty without expectation. I unpacked slowly, placing objects where they felt honest, not impressive, learning the sound of a life without commentary. Work rebuilt itself gently, a desk by the window, white walls, a plant that needed regular attention. The agency here moved differently, focused, untheatrical. No one asked me to prove endurance. They asked for clarity. I gave it willingly. Projects unfolded cleanly when no one was rewriting them behind closed doors. I didn't announce distance from my family, I simply stopped orbiting them. Messages came less often, then not at all. Consequences found their own routes, audits, questions, awkward explanations among relatives who preferred neat stories. I wasn't required for any of it. Silence, I learned, is only cruel when forced. Chosen, it becomes shelter. A year later, Christmas arrived quietly. I cooked with friends who would become constant through repetition, not obligation. We shared food, then packed what remained and walked it to a shelter nearby. The night was cold, sharp enough to wake the senses. Gratitude moved through the room without ceremony. No one performed, no one diminished. Back home, I plated my meal carefully, choosing the best portion without hesitation. The gesture felt ceremonial, not indulgent. I ate slowly, noticing texture, warmth, satisfaction. Nothing interrupted the moment. No commentary, no correction. The table held only what I placed there. I used to believe survival meant staying small until someone noticed. I understand now that survival is directional. It moves. It chooses. Silence is not emptiness. It is a room with a door I control. I decide who enters. I decide what stays. The past did not chase me here. It lost interest once it realized I wouldn't respond. The noise faded. The record remained. My work continued. Visible. Intact. Wherever this story reaches you, I hope you recognize the quiet strength of choosing yourself without spectacle. There is a life that answers back when you stop asking permission. It is steady, it is sufficient, and it is waiting exactly where you decide to stand. Unafraid, unbent, finally whole. She stepped away from the screen as if the truth carried heat. "So you're taking her side," she said, voice thin, searching for leverage that was no longer there. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain himself. He said only that he was choosing what was real. No one met my eyes after that. They couldn't. The version of me they relied on had been dismantled in front of them, piece by documented piece. I remained seated, hands resting calmly together, pulse even. For the first time, my quiet wasn't misread as weakness. It felt deliberate. It felt owned. Starting over didn't announce itself as freedom. It arrived as neutral days, unfamiliar streets, rain tapping softly against glass that had never witnessed my past. Distance didn't erase anything, but it softened the sharp edges. It gave me room to breathe without bracing, to exist without translating myself. My apartment was modest, uncluttered, honest. A desk near the window, one chair, one plant that leaned toward the light without apology. Outside, the city moved without noticing me, and that anonymity felt like relief. Work followed a different rhythm here. No competition disguised as support. No praise that required surrender. Just focus. Just contribution. I set up the office slowly, choosing what stayed and what didn't. The walls held only what mattered. Projects carried my name because they came from my hands. Nothing felt lighter because it was easy. It felt lighter because it was uncontested. I didn't make declarations about my family. I simply stopped circling them. Silence did the work conversations never could. Whatever unraveling followed happened beyond my reach and without my participation. I learned that disengagement is not cruelty. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's the boundary that allows everyone to finally face what they've avoided. On Christmas Eve, a year later, I shared a kitchen with people who knew me through consistency, not comparison. We cooked, laughed quietly, packed meals for strangers who needed warmth more than stories. The night air was sharp and honest. It woke something grounded in me. When I returned home, I plated my food carefully and chose the best portion without hesitation. No one commented. No one objected. The table reflected only my decisions. I used to believe survival meant enduring quietly until recognition arrived. I know better now. Survival is not passive, it chooses. Silence is not absence, it's space, a door, a boundary I control. I no longer wait to be invited into rooms that diminish me. I build my own and decide who enters. If this story reached you, let it remind you that a life can answer back when you stop asking permission, that steadiness doesn't need witnesses, and that sometimes the quietest step forward is the one that finally carries you home.